Welcome to TCA Live. I'm Christian. This is Andy. We come to you just about every Tuesday morning, right around 9 o'clock a.m. from beautiful Mooresville, North Carolina.
Mooresville, North Carolina, or wherever we happen to be.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. Sometimes we're on location. And so anyway, so we are coming to you live today from Mooresville, from our showroom, which you can see behind us. This is our showroom.
Back up in the hot spot here in the building.
So we're upstairs, so you guys can have a view. There's not much going on behind us this morning. It's kind of a sleepy morning here.
Yeah.
But that's all right. So so we're back live. We haven't been live for a few weeks. Like Andy said, we've been kind of coming back from the Las Vegas show, which we are going to talk about later on in our show here.
There's so much to talk about, actually. When you miss that many, there's so much that's happened over the last month,
right,
that we need to talk about.
So okay, well let's go ahead and get started. Real quick though, if you're watching and you're wondering what we talk about industry news, events that are coming up, just kind of the climate of the woodworking industry here in the U.S. With a specific focus on, of course, machinery, because that's kind of
the place
what we do.
That's where we fit into the whole thing.
Right. So Andy, what is going on in the industry? How let's kind of get caught up over the last month or so.
So as Christian was saying, we typically talk about what's going on in the industry, and so most of our discussions, we started this about close to a year and a half ago now, I guess. And most of our discussion has been surrounding the housing industry, because the housing market has not only affected what we do, we're tied pretty closely to the housing market, but it also has affected our economy as a whole, because it was the fastest, it was the strongest portion, the strongest segment of our economy in the U.S. And that has not necessarily changed, but we've the buzzword that we were using a lot last year was how we were pivoting.
Right.
And so it seems
that's right.
It seems that in our industry anyway, talking with customers and being together at the Vegas show, I should say, was great. Getting to actually interact with people again, being in that group. But as I was talking with so many customers, there is a pivot that has happened in our market as to what they're seeing their biggest challenges are. It changed, when COVID first hit. And everything just kind of shut down. Everyone was wondering what was going to happen.
That's right.
Everyone went home, and then it wasn't very long after that we started to see an uptick in our industry, because everyone was at home. So they were remodeling their spaces. They were taking care of those projects that they had wanted to take care of for so long, and they started doing that. So that helped us, because we make machinery that produces woodwork, wood pieces that people use when they go to work on these projects. So then, as we stayed in the lockdowns for a while, and people wanted to get out of cities, new housing construction started to go up,
right?
And that created another demand. So we still had what was going on with the
remodels,
remodel, and now we added all the new construction. So that just put everybody at such a they got behind. They had such an influx of business, and they just couldn't keep up. So that was also good for us, because we started to see a lot of companies that were buying machinery to try to just produce what they could.
Well, it was also good for the companies, right? Because you had companies that now all of a sudden they may have been they had some uncertainty during that initial COVID crash, but now if they were able to pivot and pick up the business of the segments that you were just talking about, they were very busy.
But all along, so we talked about new technology that we were using, video technology, streaming to do demonstrations of machines, things like that. But really what we were seeing was that people were buying new machines to take care of their existing business. They were kind of still doing things the way they had been doing it.
Sure.
But the pivot that I most recently noticed was during the show, everyone, no matter what market you're in, the topic of labor has come up, right? The people have stayed home. There have been lots of incentives that have been given to people to stay home. I was reading an article last week that right now there are 9.5 million jobs that are available in the U.S., and there are 9.2 million people that are on unemployment.
Right.
So there are some things that are happening, and also the interesting thing is that they're not 9.2 million people. Only 40% of those people are actually making more money to stay at home than they would if they were going to work. So what's the real challenge? What's the real issue with that? Why are people staying at home? And so we've had different conversations. You and I have actually had these conversations. Maybe they're making enough that it's, they start to weigh the pros and cons of, yeah, we could make a little bit more money if we went to work, but we're making pretty good money to stay at home. And we're seeing some of that. So where that comes into our market, we're in manufacturing. So the jobs, the entry-level jobs in manufacturing aren't always super attractive, especially in the wood industry. You get into manufacturing in some industries and the factories may be air conditioned. In the wood industry, typically they're not. Right. So in the summer it's hot. In the winter it's heated only to the point where they have to keep it heated to keep the machines running. And so it's cold. It's cold in the winter. It's hot in the summer. And so we're starting to have discussions where a lot of the shop owners, a lot of the company owners are really struggling to get people to come to work. And so the terms that I've been hearing lately is upskilling. We've talked about skills gap before, right?
Yep.
So now we're talking about upskilling and future proofing.
Yep.
Those are the two things that I'm hearing from our industry. Upskilling is things are changing because of future proofing. So what I mean by that is that we don't know if something like this is going to happen again. We're probably going to come to the end of the unemployment benefits. People are going to go back to work. Right. But because a lot of our customers, we've talked about it so many times, 80 to 85% of the companies that we work with are small businesses, and it only takes them having 5 people not show up to really put them in a bad spot. So small businesses are now looking to automate these positions so now they don't have to rely on people. I mean, good or bad, that's what's happening. So they're trying to future-proof. So if something like this happens again, it won't put them out of business because people won't come to work. And then the upskilling is, as a direct result of that, it's creating a place. We've been talking about skills gap for a long time. We need more educated people to help us with manufacturing and woodworking. But upskilling is a term that they've been using for a few years now, talking about what was going to happen over the next 20 years. So over the next 20 years, they thought that we were going to get to a place where we were going to be so automated that there were still going to be jobs that were going to be available, but we're going to require a higher degree of skill to perform these jobs. If you're going to run a $10 million automated line, for example, you need a little more skill than maybe you need to feed a ripsaw. For example. So upskilling is something they thought was going to be a real need in our industry over the next 10 to 20 years. And what has just recently happened with the future proofing that's happening in our industry is that the upskilling that they thought was going to be over the next 20 years is now we have an immediate need for it. So it goes back to the education, it goes back to the associations investing in the education for our industry, because this is something where it could potentially hit the labor market in our industry more than other industries, because when you think about automotive, you think about aerospace is probably maybe a little bit behind automotive as far as the level of automation and the level of skill required to work in a factory, but it's coming. That we've been behind in the wood industry. We've talked about that before, but now instead of us evolving over time into that, it's like we got to be there right now. And so that's going to require a lot of additional skill, a lot of additional training to be able to be able to contribute to our industry.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the show was so incredibly interesting to me. Just talking with people about what they're facing, the new challenges they're facing.
Yeah. So again, the show that Andy's referring to was the AWFS show in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago. Really the first major show in our industry since pretty much that show 2 years ago. And so it's been a long time since we've had a trade fair where people were able to get together in person, look at the latest and greatest technology, etc. And so Andy, how did you find the show? Not in terms of industry significance, but really on the floor. You were there for the entire show, a little bit before as well. How did you find the show?
So I've got two pieces to that. There was when we were on the floor, what we were thinking, and then also what we have seen looking back at some of the results from the show, right?
Sure.
So number one, I think that initially we were, you could tell there were fewer people that had been at the show, but I think there were more people than what some of us thought would be there.
Okay.
Right, so it seemed, because we had waves where we were very busy, and that was good. Obviously, I got to speak to a lot of customers. We didn't scan as many badges as we normally would, but we scanned a lot.
Right.
And we didn't open as many opportunities in our CRM system as we normally would, but we opened a lot. And actually, here's the most interesting thing, looking back at it, is that we have a chance to, as far as sales and what it represents to our company, we're going to be very close to the dollar amount and the number of machines sold from the show as we were in 2019.
Right, as we were 2 years ago.
That's super interesting, because we were off by a significant percentage on the number of scans. We were off by the number of opportunities that we opened, which means that we're closing a higher percentage. So that could mean a couple of things. Either our company's gaining market share, or the people who were there were
qualified.
Were very qualified.
More qualified than 2 years ago.
Right.
Sure. Absolutely. Now, I've heard that from various other companies as well who exhibit at these trade fairs, that they found that the attendance at the show, while off as far as numbers, was just as dynamic and powerful, or even more so, when it came to value.
Right. I don't think the numbers of people, like we said, there were fewer people than what we've seen in past shows, but I don't think but it was more than what maybe some of us thought would be there.
Sure.
So that wasn't the surprise. The number of people there wasn't the surprise, because there was some talk, why would people come to this show? We've talked so often that our industry is a social industry, so it could have been that a lot of people just wanted to come to a show.
Right.
And if that had happened, we would have scanned a lot of badges.
Yep.
And not sold very many machines. So that was kind of the concern, if there was something to be concerned about, was that we would see a lot of people, we would talk to a lot of people, but maybe they were only there because they wanted to go to a show and they weren't going to buy.
They wanted to be around everybody.
There's a certain energy with being at a show, and people are attracted to that. As a matter of fact, our industry, we've talked about before, is addicted to that.
We are.
But the opposite was true. We actually were quite successful in selling machines during the show too. Yep.
So with the attendance of the show, I think that it should be noted that even though we're saying that yes, attendance was off, I felt like one thing that this show was a testament to, that maybe shows in the past weren't as much, was that we needed to provide that value add on the show floor. I think this year more than years past, and in years past there was a huge amount of people that would come to the show, and they would spend 3-4 days there just walking, seeing everybody, making sure that they didn't miss one single thing, right? And I think this year, one thing that we noticed was that people were at the show floor perhaps for a shorter amount of time. There was a lot of educational segments at the show this year, and they were packed out, which is great, but that also means that during those times, people were not on the show floor. And therefore, the actual booths themselves had to provide value for someone spending time in that booth. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think there was a question on how do we staff the booth, what machines do we bring,
what technology do we show?
Yeah, so I think there's always a question, did you bring the right technology? But I do feel pretty confident that we staffed appropriately. We had the right number of people for the amount of people that were coming through. We were able, here's something else that's interesting, and this, I don't know what AWFS, if they are measuring different things. I told you that we scanned a lot of badges.
Right, sure.
One of the things that jumped out to me was that we scanned 125 companies that weren't in our database.
Right. So, right. And I think one thing that this show definitely proved to be very beneficial on is it made sure, both from the attendee perspective and from the exhibitor's perspective, that we are all up to speed, that we all know each other, right? Because there's plenty of folks who came into this industry within the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And we figured that out at the show. That was very evident at the show. So there's a lot.
Which is encouraging.
It's great. It's
there are new
great to see.
businesses
Absolutely. Who are
that are
investing
starting,
in their business.
that have started since the pandemic.
Yes.
Maybe they stayed home. They were working on projects in the back of their house, and they decided, let's start a business.
Right. Well, maybe the pandemic itself actually provided the threshold to be more overcomable, I guess you would say, where, yes, someone who had a craft turned that into a career because there was enough business to support that decision. But the point was that, we were able to show off technology that honestly we were still developing throughout the pandemic, but we didn't have a great venue besides video to show off that technology. And then folks who have started their own businesses through the pandemic, were able to connect with us at the show. So it brought everybody up to the same level, to the same page, and that was great.
So to bring that all together, we had companies that walked onto our booth that weren't in our database that bought machines that we were showing as new technology.
Sure, absolutely.
So we didn't know who they were. This was the first time we had shown new technology, and we
had never seen that.
So
married
it all
the two
came
up.
right together,
Yep,
right?
Yep. And and again, putting the right technology with the right people. So all that to say, as far as Weinig Holz-Her goes, I would say that AWFS, the fair itself, was a successful show for us. With that said, Andy, I do want to take just a minute and indulge me for a second, because I do want to say just one thing about that show, the Vegas show, and also just events that are happening right now. As we come back to where we were 2 years ago when it comes in terms of events, as we're having in-person events again, this fall, as far as our calendar goes, is full of in-person events, whether it's trade associations or internal events, etc. With that said, one thing that I just like to say is, to anyone who's planning an event out there, to anyone who's actually putting the work in and making an event happen, don't get confused, I guess I would say, with putting on an event during a post-pandemic time or a pandemic recovery time like what we're in right now. Don't get confused with just because you put it on doesn't make it a success. All right. So it's great that we're doing events again, but we shouldn't lose our standard of success when it comes to. We've had a lot of time throughout our industry's history where we built up events to be what they are. We've built up Ligna to be what it is. We've built up IWF and AWFS, etc. Our associations put on amazing conferences and plant tours each and every year. And now, when COVID hit, that stopped. Now we're coming back. I would challenge everyone. We need to raise up to that same level that we were at 2 years ago, or even go beyond that. Just having something is not good enough.
So we talk about how the show, we would gauge this as a successful show.
Absolutely.
And we don't take that lightly in saying that, because what I also don't want to happen is, years ago, I remember in this industry, shows, because of our addiction to shows, now all of a sudden there was a show that happened every month.
Right. Yep.
Every single month there was a show somewhere in the country, and it created quite the burden from the machinery side because there was a lot of expense, and even the smallest trade show, I was at a smaller company at the time that was even smaller back then, and it would still be a minimum of $50,000.
It was just
to go to a show.
It was expensive. It was time consuming. It was a resource hog, and I think you're right. So if this created a good value add for the shows and the events that are still happening, that's excellent. I guess, like I was saying, and I think that's where I hope that we are. I hope that we aren't saying, well, we can have an event, so let's just have an event, right?
But I also want to put some more emphasis on how events are going to come off in the future, where we tried to stream and it wasn't easy.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about real quick. Let's talk about
technology. We didn't stream nearly as much as we thought we were going to, because we weren't ready. The hall wasn't quite ready.
So technology at events is going to be a huge deal going forward, and I think that most folks who have who have started getting back into the event industry are going to recognize that and understand that already, is that you have to be able to interweave technology, live streaming, video, whatever technology platform you reach your customers on a regular basis, and your event. So you have to bring those together. Now, for different industries, that means different things. But for us, a couple weeks ago, that meant live streaming in our booth, and we were not ready for that. We didn't have the solid internet connection that we thought we would have.
Even after we paid money for it.
It was just one of those things where we just, as an industry, and even as us as a company, we weren't completely up to speed and ready to bring our technology into the booth setting. And so, but I think going forward, that's something that all of us are going to have to deal with and actually progress on, is how do we interweave our technology platforms, the platforms that we use to engage with our customers on a regular basis, all right, remotely. How do we interweave those with an in-person event? Because I believe that is going to be the future of in-person events.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be the future in our industry. And one of the big reasons why is not so much because people won't be traveling, but like what we were just talking about, everybody's so busy right now.
Yeah.
And so to take 3, 4, 5 days away from your shop is a very large challenge for many supervisors, managers, and owners. And therefore, to be able to, as an exhibitor or as an event planner, to be able to provide a technological platform for those people to be to engage with your event, that's the ticket right there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So we weren't quite there. I'll be incredibly interested to see how. There was a lot of news on the 5G signal they put into the fairgrounds at Ligna, or in Hanover there at the Hanover Trade Fair. And we were interested. We were excited to try that. It had the Ligna show. It was supposed to happen next month. They canceled it. Now it's pushed out to 2023. But I think that might be, instead of just trying to put repeaters throughout the building to improve the signal. One of the things that would have been nice is if you could use your cell phone. You couldn't use your cell phone.
Oh, there were too many people.
Inside the building, it was completely, the signal was gone. So certainly streaming from your phone wasn't going to work.
Yeah, it was tough. Yeah, that's something that we're going to have to get a better handle on as an industry going forward at our fairs.
I think what we learned is that the shows aren't going to go away.
Yeah, they aren't. They are not going to go away.
And maybe, let's go even beyond it, they might be necessary for our industry. Let's say that.
Okay.
I'll say that.
Yeah, sure.
Now, we don't need to get so many shows. We don't need to go back to the way it was in the early 2000s when it just seemed like there was a show every month. Actually, it didn't seem like there was a show every month somewhere.
Yeah.
But the shows are going to, while they're going to look very similar in some aspects, they're going to be very different.
They need to be. They need to be very different. And they need to be more progressive. And I believe that hopefully that we will get to that point in our industry. And that is up to the folks that are putting on these shows and these trade fairs. Just having them is not good enough. We need to be better than we were 2 years ago. And when we were putting them on all the time.
Got a shout out. My mother's watching.
Oh, hey, so Andy's mom is watching us this morning, which actually reminds me that today is Andy's birthday.
Hey.
So everyone who's watching currently, wish Andy a happy birthday, and make up for me waiting how long throughout the stream until I realized, we're 25 minutes into it, and I just remembered that it's Andy's birthday, so that's terrible. But anyway, happy birthday, Andy.
Oh, thank you, Christian. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so we are 25 minutes, so we really should wrap this up. A couple other things we wanted to bring up real quickly. And you know what? We have so much to talk about, Andy. I almost think that maybe this week is a 2 TCA week. We might have to do this again because
remember, I'm leaving tonight, so.
Oh yeah, Andy's traveling. We might have to get you on remote.
Or we can do a remote.
We might have to get remote. But okay, a couple other things for everyone watching this right now. Real quick, keep an eye on our social media because we're talking about events. We're talking about doing them better. We're talking about releasing new technology. We have some events this fall that are very exciting. We have 2 open houses in Anaheim, California. which is our West Coast showroom. We call it Expo West. So we have two open houses at Expo West, one in September, one in November. And in October, the last week of October, we have Oktoberfest here in Mooresville.
That's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a great time. So Oktoberfest is our annual open house. So we open up our showroom here. We have machines running. We're making products. We're making sawdust. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have it catered. There's going to be all of your traditional Oktoberfest activities, let's say. And so we're going to have a lot of fun.
With a twist.
Yeah. Oktoberfest with a North Carolina style.
Yeah, because if you come here expecting it to look like Munich, we don't want to crush your expectations.
So it's going to be a lot of fun. So keep an eye on our Facebook page, on our Instagram, on our LinkedIn page. We'll be posting more about those dates and how to register for those events.
Should probably subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
And like our Facebook page and follow us on Instagram.
On Instagram, yes, absolutely, you should. All of those are very important, and then you get notified when we go live, as we are this morning. So, Andy, we are going a bit long, and I know we had a lot to cover, but we should probably sign off this morning.
One last thing.
Go ahead,
because
please.
You mentioned some of the educational sessions, and I had a note here to talk about it. So there was an economist at the AWFS. I wasn't able to attend. However, I did hear that the economist that spoke at AWFS was predicting that what we're seeing right now in our industry, specific to our industry, would last through the end of 2022 at least. So we've talked about that. There's been discussion on do we see this stop at the first quarter next year? Do we see it stop fourth quarter? Right now, they're saying the end of next year. We're going to see it through the end of next year. And I think with all of the future-proofing that customers are talking about, I think we're going to see it go beyond. As far as what we're seeing right here, we're going to see our industry continue to do big things as we start to future-proof and automate and bring the wood industry up to the level of manufacturing that we've seen in other industries.
It's a good optimistic note to end.
Yeah, this is very optimistic, yes.
Yes, so leave it to Andy to be optimistic. But no, that is the truth, and we're excited for what's to come in our industry, both for the rest of this year and also for next. So again, thank you for joining us, everybody. We're live every Tuesday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be with you next week, and maybe we'll do a live stream before then as well, just to catch everybody up on what else is going on here at Weinig Holz-Her USA. Again, my name's Christian. This is Andy. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Have a great week.